Imagine waking up one day not from sleep, but into a new and unsettling clarity. The person lying next to you, whose breath you felt on your skin for years, whose life is intertwined with yours in 1,000 practical ways, feels suddenly profoundly like a stranger. It's not that you fight incessantly. In fact, the arguments have long since faded into a quiet, polite distance. The problem is deeper, more existential. The vibrant, electric charge you felt in the beginning, that sense that this person held the key to your entire world, that they were your missing half, your destiny, has evaporated, leaving behind only the hollow shell of a shared routine. You look at her and you see the ghost of your own expectations. The brilliant, witty, infinitely understanding woman you fell in love with has been replaced by a human being, with her own weary complexities, her own quiet disappointments, her own mysterious inner world that now seems utterly separate from yours. The fantasy you adored has crumbled, and you are left staring at the rubble, wondering where the real person went, or worse, wondering if she was ever there at all. Now shift the perspective. You are the woman. You feel a quiet desperation growing in the silence between you. You sense his disappointment like a physical chill in the room, but you cannot name its source. You try to be what he wants, more attentive, more successful, more easygoing, more passionate, but your efforts seem to vanish into a void. You feel the weight of an invisible standard you can never meet, because the standard itself is a phantom, a shape-shifting image in his mind that you had no part in creating. You begin to question your own reality. Am I not enough? Was I ever? Or is it him? The questions circle unanswered because the problem lives in a language neither of you speaks. This is the silent catastrophe of modern love. Not the dramatic breakups, the fiery betrayals, but the slow, quiet suffocation of two people by an invisible force. It is the agony of loving an idea instead of a person, and then waking up one day to find the idea gone, leaving you alone with a stranger you promised your life to. Why does this happen? Why does the intoxicating magic of initial connection so often curdle into a pervasive sense of loneliness? Why does the person you chose to build a life with become the source of your deepest frustration? The conventional wisdom offers easy answers. You grew apart. The passion faded. You didn't work on the relationship. But these are descriptions of the symptom, not diagnoses of the disease. They ignore the terrifying, beautiful, and fundamentally psychological truth at the heart of the matter. What if the person you fell in love with was never truly her? What if, from the very first glance, you were seeing something else entirely? What if you were, in fact, looking at a part of your own soul, a lost, disowned, and desperately yearning part, projected onto a living, breathing human being who never stood a chance of fulfilling the role you assigned her? This is the great, unsettling question we must confront. It is a question that leads us away from simple blame and into the shadowy depths of the human psyche. It forces us to consider that the relationship we seek to fix on the outside is merely a stage for a drama that is unfolding almost entirely on the inside. The problem is not that she has changed, or that you have failed. The problem may be that you are both speaking a language of fantasy, a dialect of unconscious longing, and the translation into reality was always destined to be a heartbreaking failure. But what is the source of this fantasy? Where does this powerful, life-directing phantom come from? To understand that, we must venture into hidden territory, into the realm of what the great psychologist Carl Jung called the Animus. The phantom you fell in love with has a name and a history. It is not a random creation of your conscious mind, but an archetypal force residing in the very bedrock of the human psyche. Carl Jung called this inner figure in a woman's unconscious the Animus. To misunderstand this concept is to misunderstand the entire hidden drama of relationship. The Animus is not, as is sometimes simplistically thought, a woman's inner man. It is far more profound and consequential. It is the internal psychic structure that embodies logos, the principle of meaning, order, discrimination, and spirit. It is the inner voice of reason, of judgment, of objective truth, and of assertive action. In its developed conscious form, the animus is a woman's greatest ally. It is the source of her intellectual clarity, her capacity for focused work, her ability to hold firm boundaries, and to articulate her inner truth with conviction. It is the bridge between her inner world of feeling and relatedness, the realm of eros, and the outer world of structure and accomplishment. Woman who is in a conscious relationship with her animus is not masculine. She is whole. She possesses her own authority. She does not need to borrow it from a man. But here lies the trap, the genesis of the fantasy. For most, the animus is not conscious. It remains in the unconscious and autonomous complex, a splinter personality that has not been integrated into the conscious self. And what lives in the unconscious is inevitably projected outward. This is a fundamental law of psychology. We cannot see the contents of our own unconscious directly, any more than we can see our own face without a reflection. So we look for a screen upon which to project this hidden part of ourselves. And the most compelling screen is another person. This is the hidden problem. A woman, often through no explicit fault of her own, has not been initiated into a conscious relationship with her own inner logos. Perhaps her culture, her family, her education, subtly implied that reason, authority, and decisive action were the domain of men. Perhaps she internalized a message that her own thinking was less valid, her own voice less authoritative. So this powerful unconscious animus energy seeks a vessel, and then a man appears. He seems to embody the qualities she feels she lacks. His confidence appears as true authority. His opinions sound like objective truth. His presence feels like solid ground. She falls in love not with him, but with her own unconscious animus, which she has draped over him like a royal cloak. He is no longer just John, the man with his own insecurities and flaws. He becomes the one who knows, the protector, the source of meaning. She gives him a psychic power he never earned and can never sustainably wield. This is the fantasy. This is the ghost she loves, and the man, in turn, often willingly accepts the projection. What man would refuse the role of hero, of sage, of rock? It feels like love, this adoration. It feels like purpose. But it is a contract written in invisible ink, with clauses that will inevitably surface. This dynamic finds a chilling parallel in the work of Jean-Paul Sartre. In his play No Exit, the famous line, "Hell is other people," is often misunderstood. Sartre did not mean that others are tormentors by nature. He meant that we are trapped by their gaze. We become frozen in the image they have of us. The man basking in the glow of the animus projection feels compelled to be that image. He must always be confident, always right, always strong. He cannot show vulnerability, confusion, or weakness, for that would shatter the fantasy and, he fears, the relationship. He is no longer free to be his flawed human self. He is performing a role in a play he never agreed to write. Meanwhile, the woman is trapped in a different hell. By vesting her inner authority in him, she disempowers herself. She becomes psychologically dependent. Her sense of meaning becomes contingent on his actions, his opinions, his mood. She may feel a creeping resentment, a feeling of being trapped or silenced, but she cannot locate the source, because the prison is of her own unconscious making. She is like a citizen who has given all her power to a king and then feels oppressed by his reign, forgetting she crowned him herself. This is not a conscious, malicious act. It is an autonomic function of the undeveloped psyche, as natural and unconscious as breathing. But its consequences are devastating. It sets the stage for a relationship built on a mutual misunderstanding. Two people are relating, not to each other, but to the phantoms they have placed upon the other. They are dancing with ghosts. And when the ghost inevitably falters, when the man reveals he doesn't have all the answers, when the woman feels the stifling weight of her own projected power, the entire structure begins to tremble. The love that felt so destined reveals itself as a beautifully constructed cage. But the tremors are just the beginning. The real earthquake occurs when we see how this hidden dynamic shapes not just the relationship, but the very fabric of our lived reality. The initial disillusionment feels like a personal failure, a betrayal even. The man you thought was a pillar of strength now seems evasive, emotionally clumsy, or worse, weak. The woman you believed was your intuitive, nurturing soulmate now seems needy, critical, or perpetually dissatisfied. The language of the relationship shifts from adoration to diagnosis. You begin to arm yourself with the vocabulary of therapy and pop psychology, but you wield it as a weapon. You're emotionally unavailable. You're codependent. You never listen. You're so controlling. These accusations are not entirely wrong, but they are like blaming a shadow for the shape it takes, ignoring the object casting it. They are descriptions of the symptoms caused by the unseen force of projection. The most pervasive and corrosive consequence is the transfer of inner conflict into outer warfare. The woman, feeling the instability of having her center of gravity outside herself, begins to demand that the man provide the stability she lacks internally. Her unconscious anxiety about her own unintegrated animus, her own capacity for self-directed meaning, manifests as a relentless pressure on him. She may criticize his decisions not because the decisions are inherently bad, but because they fail to align with the perfect, unconscious image of the Animus hero she needs him to be. Her feedback ceases to be about a specific action and becomes a referendum on his entire being, because he is carrying the weight of her entire psychic structure. He feels he can do nothing right because the standard is an invisible, moving target defined by a part of her psyche she herself does not know. In response, the man, feeling the unbearable weight of this projected expectation, does what any sensible creature does under unsustainable pressure. He retreats. He builds fortresses of silence, loses himself in work, or seeks refuge in the simple, rule-based worlds of hobbies or technology. His emotional unavailability is not a character flaw, but a survival strategy. To engage is to step back into the role of the flawless hero, a role he now knows is a lie and that he is doomed to fail. His retreat is not a rejection of her, but a desperate, unconscious rebellion against the phantom she has made him carry. He is trying to find a space where he can just be his imperfect self, but the relationship has become a stage, and there is no room in the wings. This dynamic is ruthlessly amplified by our modern cultural conditioning. We are sold a fairy tale of completion through another. Films, songs, and novels relentlessly reinforce the idea that the right partner will solve the problem of existence. This externalizes the entire journey of individuation. Why confront your own inner darkness? Why struggle to build your own meaning, when you can find a prince or a princess who will bring the light to you? This cultural script perfectly dovetails with the psychological mechanism of projection, creating a feedback loop of delusion. We are conditioned to expect a fantasy, and our unconscious minds are all too ready to provide one. This leads to the second major consequence, the erosion of genuine dialogue. When two people are relating to phantoms, their conversations are not exchanges between two sovereign selves. They are symbolic negotiations between two unconscious complexes. A simple question like, "What should we do this weekend?" is never just that. For the woman, it may be a test. Will he take charge in the way my animus demands? Will he create an experience that feels meaningful? For the man, it may feel like a trap. If I choose wrong, I will be failing the hero archetype again. The conversation becomes a minefield where every word can detonate hidden expectations. Real, spontaneous connection becomes impossible because both parties are constantly monitoring and performing for the unseen audience of their own projections. The psychological toll is immense. The woman may experience a deep, nameless anxiety, a feeling of being ungrounded. She might feel a rage that seems disproportionate to the immediate circumstance, because it is the rage of a soul that has given its power away. The man may sink into a quiet despair, a sense of being fundamentally inadequate and unseen for who he truly is. He might resort to bursts of anger or passive aggression, the only forms of self-assertion available to someone who feels his authentic self is not permitted to exist. They are both lonely, not because they are alone, but because they are trapped in a room with a stranger, and that stranger is the carrier of a part of their own soul they are too afraid to claim. This is the silent, shaping force of the unconscious animus. It doesn't just cause arguments. It architects a shared reality of profound misunderstanding. It turns a potential sanctuary into a hall of mirrors, where each person is endlessly reflecting a distorted image back at the other. The love that was meant to be a liberation becomes the very thing that prevents individual growth. The relationship, instead of being a container for two whole people to meet, becomes a substitute for the wholeness neither has dared to cultivate within. But this painful stalemate is not the end of the story. It is, in fact, the necessary precondition for a rebellion that can lead to a truer, more profound connection. The cage, once fully recognized, can be unlocked from the inside. The realization that you have been living a fantasy is not an ending. It is the only true beginning. The crushing weight of disillusionment is, paradoxically, the first sign of hope. It means the psyche can no longer sustain the lie. The beautiful, suffocating dream is breaking apart, allowing the cold, clean air of reality to rush in. This moment of crisis is not a failure to be mourned, but a summons to rebellion. It is a call to cease the futile project of trying to fix the reflection in the mirror, and to turn around with courage and face the source of the light. The rebellion begins not with a grand gesture toward your partner, but with a quiet, radical act of reclamation within yourself. For the woman, the path to freedom lies in one of the most demanding and rewarding journeys imaginable, the withdrawal of the animus projection and the conscious integration of its energy. This is the work of turning the hero from an external figure into an internal function. It requires asking a terrifying question: where have I given my power away? Where have I waited for a man to be the voice of reason, the source of direction, the validator of my reality? This is not about becoming emotionally cold or hyper-independent. It is about developing a conscious relationship with your own logos. It means learning to trust your own mind, to champion your own ideas, to cultivate your own sources of meaning and purpose that are independent of your relationship status. It involves catching yourself in the act of projection, that moment when you look at him and feel a surge of either adoration or fury because he has, once again, failed to match the phantom. In that moment, the rebellious act is to pause and turn the question inward. What quality am I seeing in him that actually belongs to me? What decision am I waiting for him to make that I am capable of making for myself? What truth am I waiting for him to speak that my own soul already knows? This process is what Jungian analyst Marion Woodman called conscious femininity. It is the act of building an inner marriage between your innate eros, your capacity for relatedness, feeling and connection, and your own logos, your capacity for discernment, structure, and action. You cease to be a satellite orbiting a man's sun and become a sovereign star in your own right, capable of shining with your own light and engaging in a gravitational dance with another whole being. For the man, the rebellion is equally profound. It is the courage to step down from the pedestal. It is the terrifying yet liberating act of vulnerability. It requires him to consciously reject the role of the flawless hero that has been assigned to him. This means daring to say, "I don't know." It means allowing his uncertainty, his fear, his confusion, and his needs to be visible. It is the act of dismantling the performance of invulnerability that has been his prison. His work is to differentiate himself from the projection. When he feels the pressure to have all the answers, to be the rock that never trembles, his rebellious act is to gently but firmly hand the power back. He might say, I hear you're looking for a clear answer, and I'm feeling unsure myself. What are your thoughts? This is not abdication. It is an invitation into a shared space of humanity. It is a declaration that he will no longer participate in a fantasy that robs them both of their authenticity. His task is to prove through consistent vulnerability that he is safer and more trustworthy as a flawed human than he ever was as an impeccable ghost. This rebellion transforms the relationship from a fantasy-based contract into a reality-based alliance. The energy that was once spent on maintaining the projections, her energy in seeking the hero, his energy in pretending to be one, is suddenly freed up. That energy can now be redirected toward the true purpose of a mature relationship, not as a haven from individual wholeness, but as a crucible for its cultivation. The communication that was once a symbolic negotiation between phantoms can become a genuine dialogue between two adults. Arguments cease to be apocalyptic battles over unmet archetypal needs and become manageable conversations about specific, tangible issues. A disagreement about finances is no longer a referendum on his heroism or her trust. It's a practical problem to be solved together. A moment of distance is no longer a sign of imminent abandonment. It's a respectful allowance for individual space. This shift is not a peaceful, linear process. It is a rebellion, and all rebellions are messy. The withdrawal of a projection feels like loss. The ego, which had grown comfortable with the assigned roles, will resist. There will be a period of grief for the beautiful, simple fantasy. There will be a painful awkwardness as you learn to relate to a real person instead of a symbol. But on the other side of this chaos lies something infinitely more valuable: the possibility of being truly seen and truly loved, not for the phantom you represent, but for the complex, imperfect, and authentic human being you are. This hard-won authenticity is the foundation for a connection that does not diminish, but amplifies your individual sovereignty, and it is only from this place of grounded reality that the ultimate, most profound truth about love can finally be glimpsed. After the rebellion, after the painful, necessary work of withdrawing projections and stepping off pedestals, a profound silence can descend. It is not the silence of distance or resentment, but the quiet of a storm that has passed. In this stillness, you look at the person across from you, perhaps for the very first time. You see the lines of experience on their face, the history in their eyes, the unique and separate universe of their soul, no longer obscured by the ghost of your own unmet needs. And in this moment of unadorned perception, the ultimate truth reveals itself. The goal was never to find the perfect person. The goal was to learn to see an imperfect person perfectly. This is the paradigm shift that redefines everything. Love, in its highest and most demanding form, is not a state of blissful fusion where two halves become a whole. That is the fantasy of the beginning, the intoxicating prelude. True love is the conscious daily choice to witness and cherish the wholeness of another, while remaining steadfastly committed to your own. It is the recognition that your partner was never put on this earth to complete you, but to companion you as you undertake the terrifying and glorious work of completing yourself. This realization brings us to the deepest wisdom of Viktor Frankl, who found meaning in the depths of unimaginable suffering. He wrote, "Love is the only way to grasp another human being in the innermost core of his personality. But to grasp this core, you must first stop using the other person as a mirror for your own reflection. You must see them as a thou, in the words of philosopher Martin Buber, not as an it, an object to fulfill your needs." When you relate to the animus or anima projection, you're relating to an it, a symbol. When you relate to the human being behind the projection, you finally meet a thou, a sovereign reality as vast and complex as your own. This changes the fundamental question of relationship. It is no longer what can I get from you, but who can I become with you? And more importantly, who can I become for myself inspired by the challenge of loving you? The relationship becomes a sacred container for mutual individuation. The Jungian process of becoming the unique, whole individual you are destined to be. Your partner's otherness, their stubborn refusal to perfectly conform to your fantasy, is no longer a source of frustration, but the very friction necessary for your psychological and spiritual growth. Their differences sand down your rough edges. Their strengths call forth your own latent potentials. Their flaws and vulnerabilities invite your compassion, which in turn softens your judgment toward yourself. The woman who has integrated her animus no longer seeks a man to give her life meaning. She brings her own meaning to the relationship. She does not need him to be her hero. She needs him to be her honest, vulnerable partner. In his failure to be a god, she finds the grace to love a human, and in doing so, she discovers that her capacity to love was always greater than her need to be saved. The man who has dared to be vulnerable no longer needs to armor himself against her expectations. In her acceptance of his humanity, he finds a permission slip to feel the full spectrum of his own experience. He discovers that true strength is not the absence of weakness, but the integrity to include it. Her love no longer feels like a performance review, but like a sanctuary where he can finally rest from the world's demands. This is the final, most powerful realization. The ultimate purpose of a profound relationship is to serve as a mirror that reflects not your lack, but your latent wholeness. It is designed to trigger your deepest wounds and your highest potentials, precisely so that you may be forced to heal and claim them. The anguish you felt when the fantasy crumbled was not a sign that you had chosen the wrong person. It was a sign that you were being invited to outgrow the person you were when you first made the choice. So the next time you look at your partner and feel the old ghost of disappointment, do not turn away. Do not blame. See it as a signal flare from your own soul. Ask not, why are you not the fantasy? But what part of myself am I being asked to reclaim? What truth am I being called to speak? What strength am I being summoned to embody? The love that lasts a lifetime is not a passive state of being found, but an active, continuous process of finding yourself, over and over in the clear, unflinching eyes of another. It is the courage to descend from the dizzying heights of projection into the rich, fertile soil of reality, where two separate whole trees can grow, their roots intertwined deep beneath the surface, each standing strong on its own, but creating together a shade more beautiful than either could alone. This is the love that does not promise to complete you, but to make the journey of becoming whole a journey worth taking side by side, all the way to the end. Subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.